A blonde lifeguard rescues a rich man after a yacht accident, but the next day, he sends her a letter that leaves her in tears. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Emma Walker glanced at her dive watch as the storm clouds darkened the horizon, transforming her last shift as a lifeguard into something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The red flag snapped violently in the strengthening wind, their urgent message clear to anyone still lingering on the beach. Get out of the water. Now. From her elevated position in the lifeguard tower, Emma scanned the coastline with practiced efficiency. Most beachgoers had already packed up, hurrying toward the parking lot as the first heavy droplets began to fall. The sea had transformed from its usual gentle turquoise to an angry slate gray, white-capped waves growing taller with each passing minute. That's when she saw it. A luxury yacht, perhaps 40 feet long, sleek white against the darkening sky, cutting through the choppy waters at an alarming speed, and it was heading directly toward the partially submerged reef that local sailors knew to avoid, even in perfect conditions. "What the hell?" Emma muttered, grabbing her binoculars for a better look. Through the lenses, the vessel's trajectory became unmistakable, a collision course with disaster. The yacht was far too close to the shoreline, in waters no experienced captain would navigate during an approaching storm. Emma could make out a single figure on deck, an older man with silver hair, seemingly unaware of the imminent danger. Her heart rate spiked as she reached for the radio. "Tower to Coast Guard. We have a vessel approaching the North Sector Reef. Appears to be a private yacht. Single occupant visible. Imminent collision risk. Over." The radio crackled back with static, the storm already interfering with communications. Emma tried again, adjusting the frequency as the first lightning bolt split the sky open miles offshore. Finally, a broken response. "Static. Repeat your static." "Damn it," she hissed, switching to the local channel. "Tower to Central, this is Emma at North Beach Tower. We have a vessel in danger approaching the North Sector reefs, requesting immediate Coast Guard support." This time, the reply came through clearly. Her supervisor, Jason's voice was tense. "Negative, Emma. Coast Guard can't get there in time in this storm. Monitor and wait for backup." "I repeat, just monitor the situation." Emma hesitated, her eyes fixed on the yacht. 2-meter waves were now breaking against the reef, sending explosive sprays of water skyward. The rain was coming down harder, limiting visibility by the second. She thought about the pathology exam she had scheduled for tomorrow morning at nursing school. Her partial scholarship depended on maintaining her GPA, and her sick mother depended on that scholarship. One more semester, and she could finally quit these multiple jobs. One more semester before she could focus solely on becoming a nurse and providing better care for her mom than the overworked hospital staff could offer. The unmistakable sound of fiberglass colliding with rock cut through the air like a gunshot. "Shit!" Emma dropped the radio, grabbed her rescue buoy, and yanked her red jacket over her swimsuit. The decision made itself. There was no choice at all. "Emma, what's your status?" Jason's voice demanded through the abandoned radio. "Emma, do not enter the water. That's an order." But she was already racing down the wooden steps of the tower, her feet kicking up sand as she sprinted toward the shoreline. The rain lashed against her face, cold and stinging. The waves that had seemed intimidating from the tower now loomed like liquid mountains as she approached the water's edge. Emma took 3 deep breaths, secured the rescue buoy strap around her torso, and plunged into the churning sea. The first wave hit her like a freight train, nearly knocking her backward. Finding her footing, she dove beneath the next one, feeling the powerful undertow trying to drag her further out. Every stroke forward was a battle against currents that could easily sweep her out to the open sea if she relaxed for even a moment. Years of training took over. Emma established a rhythm between the swells, using the momentary lulls to make progress toward the yacht. She could now see it was partially capsized, its hull breached where it had struck the reef. The cabin windows were underwater, the stern listing dangerously. "Hello!" she shouted, her voice barely audible above the storm's roar. "Lifeguard! Can you hear me?" No response. Emma fought her way closer, dodging floating debris, cushions, a life preserver, what looked like part of the navigation console. The salt water burned her eyes as she searched desperately for signs of the silver-haired man. There, movement, near what remained of the cockpit. Emma pushed forward with renewed determination, reaching the vessel's exposed side and pulling herself up to peer inside. The man was trapped, pinned beneath a broken hatch cover, blood mixing with seawater around him. His eyes were closed, face pale beneath a weather-beaten tan. "Sir, can you hear me?" Emma reached down, pressing her fingers against his neck. The pulse was there, weak but present. She slid into the partially flooded cabin, gasping as the cold water reached her chest. The hatch had collapsed at an angle, pinning the man's lower body but not crushing it completely. Emma braced her shoulders beneath the edge of the heavy fiberglass panel, summoning every ounce of strength. "Come on!" she grunted, pushing upward. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with an agonizing slowness, the hatch began to move. The man groaned, his eyes fluttering open momentarily before closing again. With the hatch lifted just enough, Emma managed to pull him free, careful not to cause further injury. She worked quickly to secure him to her rescue buoy, checking his airway and positioning his head to keep it above water. "I've got you," she assured him, though she wasn't sure he could hear. "We're going back to shore." The return journey was twice as difficult. The storm had intensified, the distance seemingly stretched by exhaustion and the added weight. Emma kept the man's face above water, swimming with one arm while towing him with the other. Her muscles screamed in protest with each stroke, but she pushed onward, fixing her eyes on the distant shore. They were halfway back when a massive wave rose before them, taller than any that had come before. Emma had just enough time to take a deep breath before it crashed over them with devastating force. The impact separated them. The rescue buoy's strap slipped from Emma's grasp as she was thrown underwater, tumbling in the turbulence. When she surfaced, gasping, the man was nowhere in sight. "No," she screamed, spinning in place. There, the red buoy bobbing 20 feet away, but no sign of the man. He must have slipped loose from the restraints. Emma dove beneath the surface, forcing her burning eyes open in the murky water. Visibility was near zero, but a flash of white caught her attention. The man's shirt, his body sinking rapidly toward the seafloor. With a desperate lunge, she grabbed his arm and kicked powerfully upward. Her lungs felt ready to burst by the time they broke the surface again. This time she wrapped her arm firmly across his chest, not trusting the buoy alone. "Stay with me," she gasped, resuming the grueling journey shoreward. When her feet finally touched sand, Emma was beyond exhaustion. She dragged the man onto the beach, immediately checking his vital signs. He wasn't breathing. Tilting his head back, Emma began rescue breathing, then compressions. 1 cycle, 2. "Please don't die, not after all this." Suddenly, the man convulsed, coughing up seawater. Emma quickly turned him onto his side, supporting his head as he expelled water from his lungs. His eyes opened, unfocused and confused. They were a startling blue against his weathered face. His hand reached up, trembling, to touch her cheek. "Melissa," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You came back?" "No, sir, I'm Emma, a lifeguard. You've been in an accident." The man stared at her with an intensity that was unsettling. His hand grasped hers with surprising strength. "You have her eyes," he murmured, before his own eyes fluttered closed again. In the distance, the wail of an ambulance siren cut through the storm's noise. Emma maintained her position, monitoring the man's breathing until the paramedics arrived, rushing across the wet sand with a stretcher and equipment. 50-something male, near drowning, Possible head injury and hypothermia, she reported professionally as they took over. He was conscious briefly, then lost consciousness again. Breathing is shallow but regular. One of the paramedics nodded. Good work. We'll take it from here. As they loaded the man into the ambulance, Jason finally arrived, his face a mask of fury beneath his rain poncho. What the hell were you thinking? He shouted over the storm. You disobeyed direct orders and nearly got yourself killed. Emma opened her mouth to explain when her phone vibrated in her jacket pocket. Somehow it had survived the ordeal. The screen showed a notification from her scholarship coordinator. With shaking hands, she opened the message, reading it as the ambulance pulled away. Due to university budget constraints, we regret to inform you that your partial scholarship will be reduced by 50% for the upcoming semester. Emma stared blankly at the screen, as rain mixed with tears on her face, unaware that she had just saved one of the most powerful and controversial figures in the country. A sharp knock on the door startled Emma from her fitful sleep. She winced as pain shot through her shoulder when she sat up too quickly. Every muscle in her body protested from yesterday's rescue effort. Pressing an ice pack against her throbbing shoulder, she shuffled to the door in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt. A clean-cut man in a pressed suit stood outside, looking distinctly out of place in her modest apartment complex. Emma Walker? He asked, consulting a tablet. Yes? Special delivery. He handed her a thick manila envelope. I need your signature here, please. Emma scribbled her name on the electronic pad, curious and slightly concerned. Who's it from? I'm just the messenger, ma'am. He nodded politely and walked away. Emma closed the door, examining the unmarked envelope. It was heavy, expensive-looking, and sealed with actual wax, something she'd only seen in movies. Breaking the seal, she pulled out a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery and a folded document. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the document and discovered a check. A check for $250,000, made out to her name and signed by Richard Harrington. What the hell? She gasped, nearly dropping it. The amount was more money than she'd ever seen, more than she'd make in 5 years of lifeguarding and her other part-time jobs combined. She quickly turned to the letter, her heart racing. Dear Ms. Walker, words cannot express my gratitude for your extraordinary courage yesterday. The doctors informed me that without your immediate intervention, I would not have survived. I've learned that you are pursuing nursing studies while supporting your mother through her illness. Perhaps it is fate's strange design that you saved my life, as my daughter Melissa was studying to become a nurse when she died in a car accident 5 years ago. She would have been about your age now. I would be honored if you would accept the enclosed gift to cover your complete education and any medical expenses for your mother. This is not payment for saving my life, that would be impossible to quantify, but rather my contribution to ensuring another brilliant nursing career isn't derailed by financial constraints. With deepest gratitude, Richard Harrington. Emma sank onto the edge of her bed, the letter clutched in one hand, the check in the other. Tears welled in her eyes as conflicting emotions washed over her. This money would solve everything: her mother's experimental treatment for multiple sclerosis, her tuition fees, the overdue rent. I can't accept this, she whispered, even as tears streaked her cheeks. She hadn't rescued the man expecting a reward. This felt wrong, excessive, overwhelming. Yet the mention of his daughter gave her pause. There was something more personal here than simple gratitude. Emma carefully set the check on her nightstand and reached for her laptop. A quick search revealed that Richard Harrington was the CEO of Harrington Pharmaceuticals, a major company specializing in neurological treatments. Images showed a distinguished man in his 60s, the same silver-haired man she'd pulled from the sinking yacht. Further scrolling revealed news about the company's promising new treatment for multiple sclerosis. the experimental drug her mother's doctors had recommended, but their insurance wouldn't cover. Emma closed the laptop, her mind racing. This was too coincidental, too perfect, too strange. The hospital corridors were busy when Emma arrived that afternoon. She'd changed 3 times, unsure what was appropriate for visiting a pharmaceutical CEO, finally settling on simple black pants and a blue blouse. At the information desk, she asked for Richard Harrington's room. "Are you family?" the receptionist asked, eyeing her suspiciously. "No, I'm Emma Walker." A man's voice interrupted her. Emma turned to find a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit approaching. She recognized him from her online research. Lawrence Vance, Richard's business partner. "Mr. Harrington is expecting you," he said coolly. "I'm Lawrence Vance, company counsel." "Nice to meet you." Emma extended her hand, which he shook briefly. "This way, please." As they walked, Lawrence produced a leather portfolio. "Mr. Harrington asked me to prepare these additional documents for the transfer of funds. Simple formalities. Tax purposes, you understand." "Actually, I came to return the check," Emma said firmly. Lawrence's step faltered slightly, but his expression remained neutral. "I see. Well, that's between you and Richard." They reached a private room with a security guard posted outside. Inside, Richard Harrington sat propped up in bed, his face bruised, but his blue eyes alert. Various monitors beeped steadily beside him. "Emma!" His face brightened visibly. "Come in, please." Lawrence stepped back. "I'll wait outside while you discuss matters." When the door closed, Emma approached the bed, removing the check from her purse. "Mr. Harrington, I came to return this. It's incredibly generous, but I can't accept it." Richard studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "When I saw you pulling me from the water, I thought you were Melissa. The same golden hair, the same determined eyes. Even in my confused state, I felt like I was being given a second chance." "I'm sorry about your daughter. Truly I am," Emma said softly. "But this is too much." Richard attempted to sit up straighter, wincing in pain. "I have all this fortune and no one to leave it to. Melissa died before she could realize her dream. Let me help you realize yours." Emma hesitated, conflicted. The money would change everything, but at what cost? What strings were attached to such generosity? Before she could respond, a doctor rushed in, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Harrington, your latest scans showed internal bleeding we need to address immediately." The room suddenly filled with nurses preparing Richard for surgery. As they adjusted his IV, Richard reached for Emma's hand, gripping it tightly. "Promise me you'll think about it," he whispered urgently. I'll think about it," Emma found herself saying, caught up in the sudden intensity of the moment. A nurse gently moved her aside as they unlocked the bed's wheels. "We need to take him now." Emma stepped into the hallway, feeling dazed. Lawrence was speaking with another man in hushed tones at the end of the corridor. When he saw her, he quickly approached. "Did he mention anything about the will?" Lawrence asked, studying her face closely. "Will? No, nothing about a will." Lawrence's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good. Best to let him rest. These health scares can make people impulsive." Something in his tone made Emma uneasy. "They're taking him for emergency surgery. Internal bleeding." "Yes, well, he's in good hands." Lawrence checked his watch. "If you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to. My card, if you need anything." He handed her a business card and walked away briskly, leaving Emma standing alone in the busy corridor. That evening, Emma sat at her kitchen table researching Harrington Pharmaceuticals more thoroughly. The company was on the verge of releasing Neurozoloft, hailed as a breakthrough treatment for multiple sclerosis. The same treatment her mother's neurologist had mentioned, with such hope in his eyes before explaining the prohibitive cost. The coincidence seemed too perfect. Had Richard somehow known about her mother's condition? How much research had he done on her in the hours since the rescue? Her phone rang, the hospital calling about her mother's next appointment. As Emma confirmed the date, a notification popped up on her laptop, a news alert mentioning Richard Harrington. She clicked it open while finishing her call. Harrington Pharmaceuticals CEO in stable condition after yacht accident. The article mentioned his miraculous rescue by an off-duty lifeguard, but didn't name her. Emma was grateful for the anonymity. She scrolled down to a photo of Richard at a recent charity event, standing beside Lawrence Vance and others she didn't recognize. The caption identified them as the company's executive board. They were all smiling, champagne glasses raised, celebrating Neurozoloft's final phase of clinical trials. Emma closed the laptop and rubbed her tired eyes. The check still lay on her table, a rectangle of paper that could transform her life. But something felt off about the whole situation, something she couldn't quite identify. The next day, Emma returned to the hospital during her break between classes. She'd decided to politely decline the money once more and put the whole strange episode behind her. As she approached Richard's room, she heard raised voices inside. The door was slightly ajar. "You can't just change your will because of some girl you just met." It was Lawrence's voice, tight with anger. "I can and I will." Richard sounded weaker, but equally determined. "My money is mine to distribute as I see fit." "This is Melissa all over again. You're not thinking clearly." "Ah, here she is." Richard's tone changed as he noticed Emma in the doorway. Lawrence turned sharply, his face flushing when he saw her. He gathered papers from the bed and straightened his tie. "We'll continue this discussion later," he said to Richard, then brushed past Emma, deliberately bumping her shoulder as he exited. "I apologize for that," Richard said once they were alone. "Lawrence isn't handling some recent changes well." Emma approached cautiously. "I don't want to cause problems." "You're not causing anything," Richard assured her. "Please sit." Emma noticed a silver-framed photograph on the bedside table, a young woman with blonde hair and a bright smile, wearing a graduation gown. The resemblance between them was indeed striking, down to the same arched eyebrows. "Is that Melissa?" she asked softly. Richard nodded, his expression softening. "She would have graduated from nursing school last year." An uncomfortable question had been nagging at Emma. "How do you know so much about me?" "About nursing school, my mother." Richard looked suddenly uncomfortable. "I asked my assistant to find out more about you after I was admitted. Perhaps that seems invasive, but I wanted to understand who had saved my life." Before Emma could press further, an alarm suddenly blared from one of the monitors. Richard's body stiffened, his eyes rolling back as he began to convulse violently. "Help!" Emma shouted, pressing the emergency call button repeatedly. "I need a doctor in here now." Medical staff rushed in, pushing Emma aside as they worked to stabilize him. She backed against the wall, watching in horror as they administered medication and struggled to control the seizure. In the chaos, no one noticed Lawrence watching from the hallway, his expression unreadable as the doctors fought to save Richard's life. While nurses rushed around Richard's convulsing body, Emma caught sight of Lawrence observing from the doorway, his face not showing the concern one might expect, but rather a calculating look that sent a chill down her spine. The university library was eerily quiet as Emma hunched over a glowing laptop screen, her nursing textbook lying forgotten beside her. Instead of studying for her pathology exam, she was scrolling through an archived blog she'd discovered after hours of searching, Melissa Harrington's personal journal. The post started innocuously. A young woman excited about nursing school, sharing study tips and clinical experiences. But 6 months before her death, the tone shifted dramatically. "Something's wrong with the Neurozoloft data," one entry read. "Patient reports don't match the official documentation. I need to talk to Dad, but he's been so distant lately." Emma felt a chill as she read the final entry, dated 2 days before Melissa's fatal car accident. I've compiled everything. Driving home tomorrow to show Dad the inconsistencies. This isn't about corporate politics anymore, it's about people's lives. She never made it home with those files. Emma closed the browser, feeling like an intruder in someone else's tragedy. But the coincidences were too significant to ignore. Melissa's suspicions about Neurozoloft, the same drug being developed for multiple sclerosis, Richard's strange fixation on Emma, and the heated argument she'd witnessed between Richard and Lawrence. As she packed her bag to leave, Emma glanced out the library window and froze. A black sedan was parked directly across the street, its driver obscured behind tinted windows. She'd seen the same car 3 times this week, once outside her apartment complex, once near the hospital, and now here. "You're being paranoid," she whispered to herself, but still chose the library's side exit and took a circuitous route home. Emma's apartment was quiet except for the gentle hum of medical equipment from her mother's room. She found Catherine propped up in bed, noticeably paler than she'd been even a week ago. "How is study group?" Catherine asked, her voice thin but warm. Emma placed a gentle kiss on her mother's forehead, avoiding the tubes of her oxygen supplement. "Fine. How are you feeling today?" "I've had better days." Catherine attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dr. Levine called. The insurance definitively rejected the Neurozoloft treatment. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's hand. The fingers that had once been strong enough to teach piano lessons for 8 hours straight now felt fragile as bird bones. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something," Emma began carefully. "The man I rescued. He's Richard Harrington, the CEO of the company that makes Neurozoloft." Catherine's eyes widened. "The Richard Harrington? Emma, that's... He offered me money. A lot of money." Emma swallowed hard. "Enough for your treatment and my tuition." "That's wonderful." Catherine's face brightened momentarily before she noticed Emma's expression. "You don't seem happy about it." "I'm not comfortable with this," Emma confessed. "There's something wrong about this whole situation. His daughter died 5 years ago. She was a nursing student like me, and she was investigating something about Neurozoloft before her accident." "Accident?" "Car crash. But after reading her blog, I'm not so sure it was an accident." Catherine studied her daughter's face. "Emma, what exactly are you suggesting?" "I don't know, but you can't deny we need that money." Emma gestured toward the oxygen concentrator. "You're getting worse, Mom." Catherine squeezed Emma's hand with what little strength she could muster. "Whatever you decide, I trust you. But don't throw away help when it's offered, even if the packaging seems suspicious." The next morning, Emma returned to the hospital, finding Richard looking remarkably improved. He'd been moved from intensive care to a private recovery suite that resembled a luxury hotel room more than a hospital space. "Emma, what a pleasant surprise," he greeted her, setting aside a tablet displaying stock market figures. "You're looking better," she observed, taking a seat beside his bed. "Remarkable what proper medical care can do," he smiled. "Have you considered my offer?" "I have, but I'd like to understand more first." Emma chose her words carefully. "I found Melissa's blog." The transformation in Richard's demeanor was instantaneous and alarming. His pleasant expression hardened, eyes narrowing as he reached for the monitor attached to his heart rate. "Who's been talking to you?" he demanded, disconnecting the sensor, which immediately set off alarms at the nurse's station. "No one. I just found her public blog online." Richard glanced at the door as hurried footsteps approached. "Go," he ordered. "You don't understand what you're getting into." A nurse burst in, followed by a doctor. Richard waved them off with practiced charm. "Sorry, accident with the monitor, I'm fine." The medical staff reset the equipment, casting suspicious glances at Emma. When they left, Richard's voice dropped to a whisper. "My daughter's death was complicated. The official story is simpler, cleaner, leave it at that." Emma stood her ground. She was investigating Neurozeloft, wasn't she? The same drug my mother needs. You should leave. Richard turned away. Now. In the hospital parking garage, Emma fumbled for her car keys, shaken by Richard's reaction. A shadow fell across her, and she turned to find Lawrence standing uncomfortably close. Curious little nurse, aren't you? His voice was soft but menacing. Following in Melissa's footsteps might not be the wisest career move. Emma backed away. I don't know what you're talking about. Stay away from Richard and the company. Your mother's condition is unfortunate, but not our concern. Her blood ran cold. How do you know about my mother? Lawrence smiled thinly. We know quite a bit about you, Ms. Walker. This curiosity of yours could prove costly. Before she could respond, he walked away, disappearing among the parked cars. Emma's hands shook as she unlocked her apartment door. The conversation with Lawrence had left her deeply unsettled. How much did they know about her? About her mother? The answer came the moment she stepped inside. Her living room had been methodically ransacked, drawers pulled out, cushions sliced open, books scattered across the floor. Her laptop was gone, along with all her notes on Melissa and Neurozeloft. Mom! Emma raced to her mother's room, finding Catherine asleep, undisturbed and thankfully alone. As she surveyed the damage, her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Accidents happen to curious people, too. Emma sank onto what remained of her couch, reality crashing down around her. This wasn't just about a grateful CEO anymore. She'd stumbled into something dangerous, something people were willing to threaten her over. She needed help, but who could she trust? The police would need evidence she no longer possessed. Richard had warned her off. Her friends weren't equipped for corporate conspiracies. Then she remembered a name from Melissa's blog, Diane Carter, an investigative reporter Melissa had planned to contact. A quick search revealed Carter had published several exposés on pharmaceutical companies before mysteriously stepping back from high-profile journalism 3 years ago. It took Emma 2 hours and multiple calls to track down a contact number, and another hour to convince Carter's assistant she wasn't a crank caller. Finally, a wary voice came on the line. Whatever this is about, I'm not interested. It's about Melissa Harrington and Neurozeloft, Emma said quickly. And I think I'm being followed. A long pause. Give me an address, not yours. Somewhere public but quiet. The diner Carter suggested was in a suburban strip mall, deliberately mundane. Emma arrived early, choosing a booth with clear sight lines to all exits. Diane Carter appeared precisely on time, a thin woman in her 50s with prematurely gray hair and eyes that darted continuously around the restaurant. You're the Lifeguard, Carter stated, sliding into the booth. It was on the news. Emma nodded. Richard Harrington offered me money afterward. A lot of money. Of course he did. Carter signaled the waitress for coffee but didn't remove her coat. What did Melissa's blog tell you? That she found discrepancies in Neurozeloft's trial data before she died, and now her father is offering to pay for my mother's MS treatment with the same drug. Carter's hands trembled slightly as she added sugar to her coffee. I've been living half off-grid for 3 years because of what I know. Melissa contacted me 2 days before she died, said she had proof. She never made it to our meeting. Proof of what exactly? Carter leaned forward, lowering her voice. Melissa discovered they falsified data to push Neurozeloft through approval. That miracle MS drug they're promoting? It causes severe liver damage in nearly 30% of patients, but they buried those results. Emma felt sick. My mother is scheduled to start that treatment next week. Richard wanted to pull the drug when he found out, but Lawrence and the board threatened him. They have too much invested. Carter glanced nervously at the door. I believe Melissa's accident wasn't coincidental. Are you saying Lawrence had her killed? I'm saying people with billions at stake don't let idealistic whistleblowers ruin them. Carter drained her coffee in one gulp. And now you're asking the same questions she did. As Emma drove home, her mind raced with everything Carter had revealed. The weight of the situation pressed down on her. Her mother's health, Richard's complex involvement, the danger surrounding Zoloft. Was Richard truly a victim of his board's machinations, or was he complicit in covering up the drug's dangers? Lost in thought, she didn't notice the black SUV until it swerved suddenly into her lane. Emma yanked the steering wheel right, her car skidding onto the shoulder as the SUV accelerated past. Through the tinted windows, she caught a glimpse of a driver in dark glasses, deliberately forcing her off the road. Her car shuddered to a stop against the guardrail, the impact jarring but not damaging. Emma sat frozen, hands gripping the wheel, heart pounding in her chest as the reality crystallized. This wasn't just about Richard anymore. Her life was in danger, too. Catherine opened her eyes slowly, her skin recovering its natural color. But before Emma could celebrate, her phone vibrated with a message from a blocked number. Lawrence wasn't the only one who knew about you. We all know. Emma burst through the hospital entrance, her heart pounding against her ribs. The conversation with Diane Carter replayed in her mind, each word more terrifying than the last. Zoloft caused liver damage in 30% of patients, the same drug her mother was scheduled to receive. I need to see Richard Harrington, she told the receptionist, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman typed something into her computer, frowning slightly. I'm sorry, but Mr. Harrington isn't here. What do you mean? He was in recovery yesterday. According to our records, he checked himself out against medical advice this morning. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. He just had surgery for internal bleeding. The receptionist shrugged apologetically. Voluntary discharge. His private physician signed off on it. Something was very wrong. Richard had been in no condition to leave, especially after his seizure. Emma pulled out her phone, dialing her home number. No answer. The knot in her stomach tightened as she ran back to her car. 20 minutes later, she crashed through her apartment door. Mom? Mom. The sight that greeted her stopped her cold. Catherine lay unconscious on her bed, her breathing shallow and labored. An unfamiliar IV bag hung from the portable stand beside her. Mom! Emma rushed to her side, checking her pulse. It was rapid and weak. Catherine's normally pale complexion had taken on a yellowish tinge. A business card sat on the nightstand. Special nursing services, arranged by Harrington Pharmaceuticals. Below it, a handwritten note. First dose administered as scheduled. No, 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 Emma whispered, immediately disconnecting the IV. She grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. I need an ambulance immediately. My mother is unresponsive with suspected medication reaction, possible liver failure. Within minutes, paramedics were loading Catherine into an ambulance. Emma climbed in beside her, clutching her mother's limp hand. What was she given? One paramedic asked. Zoloft, Emma replied, her voice breaking. It's an experimental MS drug. The paramedic exchanged a look with his colleague. We'd better alert the emergency department. They'll need a liver panel immediately. At the hospital, Catherine was rushed into the emergency room. Emma paced the waiting area, alternating between terror and rage. Who had sent that special nurse? Was it Richard's doing or Lawrence's? Hours passed before a doctor finally approached her. Ms. Walker, I'm Dr. Patel, hepatology. Emma braced herself. How is she? Your mother is experiencing acute liver failure. Her enzymes are off the charts. We've started countermeasures, but I need to know exactly what she was given. It's called Zoloft. It's still in final trials at Harrington Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Patel's expression darkened. I've read about it. There were rumors about adverse effects, but nothing documented. We're doing everything we can, but you should prepare yourself. The next 24 hours will be critical. Emma collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. How had everything spiraled so completely out of control in just 3 days? From a routine lifeguard shift to this nightmare, her mother fighting for her life, Richard missing and unknown enemies watching her every move. Her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. House of Boats, Pier 7, midnight. Come alone. Emma stared at the message. It was obviously a trap. But it might be her only chance to get answers. Answers that could save her mother's life. A nurse approached, interrupting her thoughts. Ms. Walker, your mother is stabilized for now. You can see her briefly. Catherine lay surrounded by machines, her face obscured by an oxygen mask. Emma took her fragile hand, feeling tears stream down her face. I'm going to fix this, Mom, she whispered. I promise. As she left the ICU, Emma nearly collided with someone in the hallway. Lawrence. How unfortunate, he said, his voice devoid of genuine sympathy. I heard about your mother's admission. Emma backed away. Stay away from her. I assure you, I'm merely checking on a company matter. The nurse who visited your mother was not authorized by us. Where's Richard? Lawrence's expression gave nothing away. Recovering? Privately, I imagine. His sudden discharge was unexpected. Emma studied his face, searching for tells of deception. Did you send that text about Pier 7? A flicker of confusion crossed Lawrence's features. Genuine, Emma thought. I don't know what you're talking about. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with another text. Clock is ticking. Midnight. Lawrence glanced at her phone, then back at her face. You seem to have other concerns. I'll leave you to them. As he walked away, Emma realized something important. If Lawrence hadn't sent the text, someone else was involved, someone who might lead her to Richard. Pier 7 was deserted at midnight, the marina silent except for the gentle lapping of waves against the docks. Most boat owners were home on this Tuesday night, their vessels secured and dark. Emma approached cautiously, dressed entirely in black with her lifeguard wetsuit underneath. If things went wrong, the water might be her only escape route. Years of ocean training had taught her to use water to her advantage. The boathouse at the end of Pier 7 was a large wooden structure, housing maintenance equipment and smaller watercraft during winter. A dim light glowed from inside. Instead of approaching the main entrance, which was likely watched, Emma slipped into the water at Pier 6, swimming silently beneath the docks until she reached the boathouse's rear platform. Using techniques honed from countless rescue operations, she lifted herself noiselessly onto the wooden deck. A small window, partially open for ventilation, provided a view inside. Emma's breath caught when she saw Richard tied to a chair in the center of the room. His face was bruised and swollen, dried blood crusting his silver hair. He appeared semi-conscious, his head lolling forward. Emma calculated her options. There were at least 2 men inside, one visible near Richard, another moving in the shadows, both armed. She needed a distraction. Reaching into her waterproof bag, she removed a small pocket knife and a lighter, basic equipment from her lifeguard kit. Moving to the side of the boathouse, she found what she was looking for, the electrical meter. 3 minutes later, she had created a small diversion. The power cut out, plunging the boathouse into darkness. Shouts of confusion erupted from inside. Emma slipped through the window, landing silently on the wooden floor. In the darkness, she navigated by memory to where Richard had been sitting. "Richard," she whispered, reaching his chair and cutting his restraints. "It's Emma. Can you walk?" "Emma?" His voice was hoarse. "They want Melissa's files, hidden in the yacht." "What yacht? It sank." "Not completely," he rasped. "Main cabin intact, underwater. Safe behind the navigation panel. Combination 72501. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as the men searched for the source of the power outage. "We need to move, now." Emma helped Richard to his feet, supporting his weight as they stumbled toward the rear of the boathouse. "There!" A shout came from behind them, followed by the distinctive click of a gun being cocked. Emma whirled around, pushing Richard behind a stack of life jackets. In the dim emergency lighting, she recognized the man approaching, Lawrence. "How predictable, Emma," he said, training his gun on her. "Or should I say, our new Melissa. Richard has quite a history of trying to replace his daughter." "That's not true," Richard protested weakly from behind the life jackets. "Of course it is," Lawrence countered smoothly. "The red-headed intern last year, the Asian student before her, all resembling Melissa in some way, all sent packing when they discovered too much." Emma felt a chill. Was Lawrence trying to turn her against Richard, or was there truth to his words? "Why save all that data if you're trying to hide the truth?" she asked Richard directly. "Because he's a coward," Lawrence answered instead. "Can't decide between doing the right thing and keeping his empire." While Lawrence was talking, Emma had been slowly inching toward an old oil lamp on a nearby table. In one fluid motion, she knocked it over, sending burning oil spreading across the wooden floor. Smoke quickly filled the boathouse. In the confusion, Emma grabbed Richard and dragged him toward the back exit. They burst onto the rear platform, the cool night air a relief after the smoky interior. "We need to get those files to save my mother," Emma shouted over the sounds of crackling flames and shouting men. "I can take you to them," Richard replied, clearly in pain but determined. They dove into the dark water just as Lawrence emerged onto the platform, firing wildly into the night. The cold shock momentarily took Emma's breath away, but her lifeguard training kicked in. She pulled Richard close, helping him stay afloat as they swam away from the burning boathouse. 15 minutes later, they reached the area where Richard's yacht had sunk. Only the top of the mast was visible above water, a ghostly marker of the shipwreck below. "I'll guide you down," Emma said, helping Richard prepare for the dive. "Just follow my lead and signal if you need to surface." The underwater world was pitch black, lit only by the waterproof flashlight Emma had brought. They descended slowly, Richard clearly struggling with his injuries but pressing on. The yacht lay on its side on the sandy bottom, partially broken, but with the main cabin intact, just as Richard had said. Emma led him to a small hatch, which he opened with hands that shook from cold and exhaustion. Inside, Richard made his way to the navigation panel, punching the combination into a hidden keypad. A waterproof compartment slid open, revealing a sealed case containing what looked like a hard drive. Their lungs burning for air, they kicked upward, breaking the surface with desperate gasps. "I've got it," Richard wheezed, holding up the case. Flashing lights cut through the darkness, police boats approaching, rapidly. On the shore, Emma could see more officers and what looked like FBI agents swarming the area. "Anonymous tip about suspicious activity at the boathouse," a familiar voice called from the nearest police boat. Diane Carter stood beside a uniformed officer, a satisfied smile on her face. "Thought you might need backup." As they were helped aboard, Emma clutched the waterproof case containing the drive. With Lawrence's operation exposed and the evidence secure, they might finally have what they needed to stop Nerozaloft and save her mother. But as Richard was taken below deck for medical attention, Emma couldn't help but wonder about Lawrence's accusations. How many replacements for Melissa had there been? And was she just the latest in a pattern, or something different? While the paramedics rushed around Richard, Emma caught sight of Lawrence being led away in handcuffs on the shore. For the first time since the yacht rescue, she allowed herself a moment of hope, though she knew the battle was far from over. In the hospital room 6 hours later, Emma watched as her mother received an experimental antidote developed from the protocols on Richard's drive. The doctors had been skeptical at first, but the evidence was irrefutable, and with Catherine's condition deteriorating rapidly, they had nothing to lose. While nurses monitored the medication's effects, Emma stepped into the hallway, where Richard waited in a wheelchair, his arm in a sling from the bullet graze sustained during their escape. "You had this antidote all along," she said, not a question but an accusation. "I developed it in secret after Melissa died," he admitted. "Too late for her, but I hoped someday." "And the others? The ones Lawrence mentioned?" Richard looked away. "I've made mistakes trying to fill a void that can't be filled. But when you saved me from that yacht, I realized nothing would replace Melissa. I needed to do right by her memory instead." Emma studied his face, searching for truth in his words. "And the scholarship?" "Still stands, but not to buy your silence. To honor two extraordinary women, Melissa and you." Emma allowed herself a small smile. "You know what's ironic? In the end, the one who really needed saving wasn't you on that yacht. It was me." The hospital corridor seemed endless as Emma and Richard rushed toward the private laboratory wing, the precious drive clutched tightly in Emma's hand. Every second counted now. Catherine's liver was failing rapidly, her body fighting a battle it couldn't win without intervention. "This way," Richard directed, his voice strained as he pushed through his own pain. Despite his injuries, he moved with renewed purpose, leading Emma through a series of security doors that opened with his biometric scan. They burst into a sterile laboratory where 3 scientists in white coats looked up in surprise. "Dr. Chen," Richard addressed the eldest of the group. "Emergency Protocol 7. We need to analyze this immediately." The scientist's eyes widened at Richard's battered appearance, but asked no questions as he took the waterproof case. With practiced efficiency, he connected the drive to a specialized computer system. "What exactly are we looking for?" Dr. Chen asked, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Melissa's original Neurozoloft data," Richard replied. "The unaltered test results." Emma watched anxiously as files populated the screen. Chemical formulas, patient reports, statistical analyses. Dr. Chen's expression grew increasingly grave as he scrolled through the information. "These toxicity levels," he murmured. "They're nowhere in our official documentation." "Because Lawrence and the board buried them," Richard confirmed grimly. "But Melissa found them and copied everything." One of the younger scientists gasped. "The mortality rate in these hidden trials, it's 11 times what was reported to the FDA." Richard turned to Emma. "This is why Melissa was coming to see me that day. This is what she died trying to expose." Emma's focus remained practical. "Can you help my mother?" Richard moved to a keypad on the laboratory wall, entering a complex sequence. A section of seemingly solid wall slid open, revealing a refrigerated storage unit. "After Melissa's death, I didn't trust anyone," he explained, removing a small case from the unit. "I've been working on this antidote in secret for years. It counteracts Neurozoloft's hepatotoxic effects, but it was never approved for human trials." Emma stared at the vials nestled in the case. "So it's experimental? Untested?" "On humans, yes." Richard met her gaze steadily. "But the animal trials were promising. It's your mother's best chance." Emma looked from the vials to the damning data still displayed on the screens. Without treatment, her mother would die within hours. This untested antidote might kill her faster or save her life. "Let's go," she decided, carefully placing the precious vials in a transport cooler. The drive back to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. Richard had called ahead, ensuring they'd have immediate access to the emergency department. As they raced through the night, Emma clutched the cooler like it contained her mother's very soul. "Why didn't you expose the truth about Neurozoloft after Melissa died?" she asked, breaking the tense silence. Richard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I tried, but Lawrence had already secured board support and threatened to destroy me. And Melissa's reputation. They suggested her findings were fabricated, that she was mentally unstable." "So you just gave up?" Emma couldn't keep the accusation from her voice. "No, I played along while gathering evidence, building the antidote, waiting for the right moment. He glanced at her. I never expected that moment would come because a lifeguard pulled me from the ocean. At the hospital, they were met by a team of doctors, including Dr. Patel and 2 specialists Richard had called in. The group huddled in a conference room, reviewing both Melissa's data and the antidote protocols. "This is highly irregular," one specialist objected. "We can't administer an unapproved compound." "My mother will die without it," Emma countered. "The regular treatments can't reverse what Zoloft has done." Dr. Patel studied the data carefully. "Her liver function is declining by the hour. Conventional treatments aren't working." He looked up at his colleagues. "We have nothing to lose." The decision made, they moved quickly. Emma stood beside her mother's bed, holding her hand as the antidote was slowly administered. Catherine remained unresponsive, the only signs of life the gentle rise and fall of her chest and the steady, if weak, beeping of the heart monitor. "How long until we know if it's working?" Emma asked softly. "If her liver enzymes begin to decrease, we should see improvement within a few hours," Dr. Patel replied. "All we can do now is wait." As the doctors continued their work, Emma found herself alone with Richard in the hospital cafeteria. He looked haggard, the events of the past few days etched into the lines of his face. "Lawrence said something at the boathouse," Emma began carefully, "about others, women who resembled Melissa." Richard's expression darkened. "I wondered when you'd bring that up. Was he telling the truth?" A long silence stretched between them, before Richard nodded almost imperceptibly. "After Melissa died, there was a void, impossible to fill." He stared into his untouched coffee. "I found myself drawn to young women who reminded me of her, offering mentorship, scholarships." "Like you did with me," Emma said flatly. "Initially, yes." Richard's admission hung heavy in the air. "When I saw you pulling me from the water, half-conscious and desperate for air, I thought you were her. A hallucination, a miracle I didn't know. But in that moment, I believed my daughter had come back to save me." Emma felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "How many others were there?" "3, all nursing students." Richard's voice was barely audible. "I told myself I was honoring Melissa's memory by helping them. But Lawrence was right, I was trying to replace her." "What happened to them?" "They moved on, took the money, finished school. I never crossed any inappropriate boundaries, if that's what you're asking. But my interest in them wasn't healthy." Emma struggled to reconcile this confession with the man who had just risked everything to save her mother. "And me? Am I just another replacement?" Richard finally met her gaze. "You were at first, but then you started asking questions. The same questions Melissa asked. And instead of running from them, I realized this was my chance to make things right. Not just for Melissa's memory, but for all the patients who could be harmed by Zoloft." Their conversation was interrupted by Emma's phone ringing. Diane Carter. "Emma, you need to know. Lawrence wasn't working alone. The company executives are destroying evidence as we speak." Emma's heart raced. "We have the original data secured. We're at the hospital now." "Good. But there's more. The board is holding an emergency meeting tomorrow to vote Richard out and push Zoloft to market immediately." As Emma relayed this information to Richard, a hospital security guard approached their table. "Ms. Walker, Detective Morales would like to speak with you." He gestured toward a serious-looking man in a suit standing by the cafeteria entrance. The detective introduced himself briskly. "We're investigating Lawrence Vance's operation. During our search of his office, we found files on several young women Richard Harrington has approached over the past few years." Emma glanced at Richard, whose face had gone pale. "We also found evidence suggesting Melissa Harrington's accident may not have been accidental." The detective's expression softened slightly. "I understand your mother is in critical condition. I'll keep this brief, but we'll need a full statement later." After answering the detective's preliminary questions, Emma returned to her mother's room, her mind reeling from everything she'd learned. Richard had been manipulating young women as substitutes for his daughter. Lawrence had likely been involved in Melissa's death. And somewhere in between these terrible truths lay her own complicated role in all of this. Dr. Patel intercepted her outside Catherine's room, his expression cautiously optimistic. Her latest blood work shows a significant decrease in liver enzymes. The treatment appears to be working. Relief washed over Emma like a physical force. She's going to be okay? It's too soon to say definitively, but these are very encouraging signs, he confirmed. Inside the room, Emma pulled a chair close to her mother's bed. Catherine still looked frail, but there was a hint of natural color returning to her skin. Emma gently took her hand, overwhelmed by everything that had happened since that fateful Lifeguard shift just days ago. A noise at the door made her look up. Richard stood there, hesitant to enter. "The doctors say she's responding to the treatment," Emma said. "I'm glad." He remained in the doorway as if unsure of his welcome. "Emma, about what I told you." "I don't know what to think about you," she interrupted. "You used these women. Used me. But you're also saving my mother's life." "I don't expect forgiveness," Richard replied quietly. "But I want you to know that whatever happens next, with the company, with the investigation, the scholarship fund for your education is secure. No strings attached." Before Emma could respond, her phone vibrated with a message. She expected it to be from Diane, but instead saw an unfamiliar blocked number. The text contained a single line. "Lawrence wasn't the only one who knew about you. We all know." The early morning sun cast long shadows across the nursing school's brick facade as Emma climbed the steps, her backpack heavy with textbooks she hadn't opened in days. Her mind remained fixated on the threatening text message from the night before. Someone was watching her, someone connected to Lawrence and the Neurozoloft conspiracy. She glanced over her shoulder for the third time since parking her car. The campus seemed normal. Students rushing to class, professors clutching coffee cups, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Dr. Winters, the anatomy professor, barely acknowledged her as she slipped into the lecture hall, just as he began his presentation. Emma tried to focus on the intricate diagrams of the cardiovascular system projected on the screen, but her thoughts kept drifting back to her mother, now showing signs of recovery in the hospital. When the lecture ended, Emma was packing her notes when she heard her name called over the classroom speaker. "Emma Walker, please report to the program coordinator's office immediately." A ripple of curious glances followed her as she left the lecture hall. This couldn't be good. Dr. Collins, the nursing program coordinator, was waiting behind his desk, his usually friendly demeanor replaced by a professional stiffness that made Emma's stomach tighten. "Ms. Walker, please sit down." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Is something wrong?" "I've received some concerning information about your academic performance." Dr. Collins opened a folder on his desk. "According to our records, you've missed 3 clinical rotations this semester and failed to submit 2 major assignments." Emma leaned forward, confused. "That's not right. I've attended every clinical except yesterday's, which I had permission to miss because of my mother's hospitalization." Dr. Collins frowned, turning his monitor toward her. "That's not what our system shows." Emma stared at the screen in disbelief. Her perfect attendance record had been altered, showing multiple unexcused absences. Even more alarming, her grades for the past semester had been changed, turning her A's into C's and D's. "Someone's tampered with my records," she said, her voice shaking. "This isn't accurate." "That's a serious accusation, Ms. Walker." Dr. Collins leaned back in his chair. "Especially given your recent association with Richard Harrington. The Ethics Committee has questions about that relationship and your sudden financial windfall." Emma felt a chill run through her. "How do you know about that?" An anonymous source provided documentation. He slid a printout across the desk, a copy of Richard's check and letter. We take conflicts of interest very seriously in healthcare education. Walking back to her car, Emma's phone rang. It was Richard. "How's your mother?" he asked when she answered. "Improving," Emma replied tersely. "But I just discovered someone hacked into my academic records and altered my grades and attendance. They're also questioning my ethics because of your scholarship." A heavy silence followed. "I was afraid of this," Richard finally said. "Lawrence's allies moving against you. Can you meet me at Riverside Cafe in an hour? We need to talk." The cafe was deliberately chosen, a quiet spot far from both the hospital and Harrington Pharmaceuticals. Richard was already seated in a corner booth when Emma arrived, looking pale but determined. "They're not going to stop," he said without preamble as Emma sat down. "Lawrence may be in custody, but he's just one part of a larger operation." "I can't have my future destroyed because I saved your life," Emma snapped. "I need to focus on my mother and my education, not corporate conspiracies." Richard nodded solemnly. "I understand. That's why I've decided to use my position as majority shareholder to dismantle this operation from the inside." "What does that mean exactly?" "I'm calling for a complete audit of all Neurozoloft research, a recall of all trial medications, and a restructuring of the executive board." He leaned forward. "But I need your help." Emma shook her head firmly. "No, I want out of this. I need to get back to my life." "They won't let you," Richard insisted. "They've already targeted your academic record. Do you think they'll stop there?" Before Emma could respond, her phone rang. Dr. Collins again. "Ms. Walker, I need you to return to campus immediately," he said, his voice tight. "Security found something in your locker." "What are you talking about? I don't even use that locker." "Just come now." The call ended abruptly. An hour later, Emma stood in the dean's office, staring in horror at the documents spread across his desk. Falsified patient charts with her signature, fabricated drug administration records showing she had tested experimental medications on patients without consent during her clinical rotations. "These are completely fake," she protested. "I've never seen these before." The dean's expression was grave. "These were found in your assigned locker, Ms. Walker, along with samples of what appear to be pharmaceutical trial medications." "Someone is framing me." Emma fought to keep her voice steady. "These documents are forgeries. I'm being targeted because of what I know about Harrington Pharmaceuticals." "That's a serious allegation," the dean replied. "But so is falsifying medical records and unauthorized drug administration. I'm afraid we have no choice but to suspend you pending a full investigation." Emma sat in her car in the campus parking lot, tears streaming down her face as the magnitude of what was happening hit her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Call me now." "They planted false evidence in my locker," she said when he answered. "I've been suspended." "Come to my house," Richard replied without hesitation. "It's time to fight back." Richard's estate was a modernist mansion overlooking the ocean, not far from where Emma had rescued him days earlier. Security guards patrolled the perimeter, a stark reminder of the danger they both faced. Inside his home office, Richard had transformed a wall into an investigation board. Photos of Lawrence and other executives, timelines, and documents connected by colored strings. "This goes deeper than I initially realized," he explained. "At least 3 other board members were directly involved in falsifying the Neurozoloft data, and they've been watching you since the moment you pulled me from that yacht." "Why me? Why not just silence you directly?" "Because you were an unknown variable, someone who might have seen or heard something during the rescue." Richard pointed to a photograph of a stoic man in an expensive suit. "Victor Mercer, our CFO, Lawrence's closest ally. His pharmaceutical background gives him the knowledge to manipulate drug formulations." Emma studied the investigation board, a surreal feeling washing over her. Just a week ago, Her biggest concern had been passing her pathology exam. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "I'm calling an extraordinary board meeting tomorrow, officially to discuss the company's response to my accident and Lawrence's arrest." Richard's expression hardened, but actually to confront the remaining conspirators with Melissa's evidence. "And where do I fit into this plan?" "I want to introduce you as my special consultant on patient safety. Your nursing background makes it believable." Richard hesitated. "It will put you in the room with the people who are trying to destroy you. We can force their hand." Emma paced the room, weighing her options. The threat against her academic future was clear. Whoever was behind this wouldn't stop until she was completely discredited. "This is insane," she muttered. "I should be studying for finals, not playing corporate espionage." "I know it's not fair," Richard acknowledged. "But these people won't leave you alone now. They can't risk what you know." Emma's phone rang. The hospital. Dr. Patel's update was positive. Catherine was responding well to the antidote. Her liver function improving steadily. One problem solving itself, at least. "If I do this," Emma said after ending the call, "I need something from you first. A complete tour of Harrington Pharmaceuticals, labs, data centers, everything. I want to see what I'm fighting for." The next morning, Emma walked through the sleek glass doors of Harrington Pharmaceuticals headquarters, her visitor badge prominently displayed. Richard had introduced her to the reception staff as his patient safety consultant, eliciting curious stares. "Most employees don't know about Lawrence's arrest yet," Richard explained quietly as they rode the elevator. "The official story is that he's on personal leave." The tour was comprehensive. Research labs where scientists in white coats carefully measured compounds, production facilities with gleaming steel equipment, and finally, the executive floor where the board meeting would take place the following day. "Richard," a woman's voice called from down the hallway. "We weren't expecting you back so soon after your accident." Emma recognized her immediately from Richard's investigation board. Diane Harper, Chief Marketing Officer, and another suspected conspirator. "Just showing our new patient safety consultant around," Richard replied smoothly. "Emma, this is Diane Harper." The woman's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly as she shook Emma's hand. "Patient safety? That's a new department." "Recent events have highlighted some areas of concern," Richard said. "Emma brings valuable frontline medical perspective." As Richard guided Emma to the main data center, showing her how to access the system without detection, she noticed the subtle glances exchanged between employees, a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Their final stop was a seemingly casual meeting with the three executives Richard suspected of conspiracy: Victor Mercer, Diane Harper, and James Wilson, the research director. Richard introduced Emma to each, mentioning the upcoming board meeting. "We'll be discussing some significant policy changes," Richard announced. "Complete transparency in all trial data moving forward." Emma didn't miss the looks exchanged between the three executives, a silent communication that confirmed Richard's suspicions. Back in Richard's car, Emma stared out the window at the sprawling corporate campus. "They know exactly who I am," she said. They were practically telegraphing it. "Of course they do," Richard started the engine. "But now they know we're not backing down." "So what's the actual plan? I walk into that board meeting tomorrow, and then what?" "We use you as bait," Richard said bluntly. "They're so focused on neutralizing you that they'll make mistakes. Meanwhile, I'll present Melissa's evidence and call for an immediate suspension of all Neurozoloft activities." Emma shook her head in disbelief at what her life had become. As they pulled away from the building, she reached into her bag and touched her Lifeguard wetsuit, folded neatly at the bottom. In the water, she had advantages few others possessed: strength, endurance, and the ability to remain calm in crisis. Whatever happened tomorrow, she would be prepared. When she arrived home, another anonymous text waited on her phone, this one with an attached image, a photograph of her taken that very day in the Harrington building. Emma stared at the image, then at the threat that followed. Her hand tightened around her phone as determination replaced fear. "I'm not just fighting for my life or yours," she said aloud, as if the sender could hear her. "I'm fighting for all the people who could die if this medication continues on the market." Emma took a deep breath as she approached the security checkpoint at Harrington Pharmaceuticals, acutely aware of how different this visit was from yesterday's tour. Today, she wasn't just observing, she was infiltrating. "Emma Walker for Mr. Harrington," she stated confidently, presenting her newly printed badge with its executive assistant designation. The guard barely glanced at it before waving her through. "Mr. Harrington mentioned you'd be coming in early. You're all set." The ease of her entry was simultaneously reassuring and unsettling. Richard's influence opened doors, but it also meant everyone would be watching her. As she rode the elevator to the executive floor, Emma mentally reviewed their plan. She would spend the morning organizing Richard's files while actually accessing restricted data. Meanwhile, Richard would prepare for the afternoon board meeting, where they would confront the conspirators with the evidence. The elevator doors opened to reveal a buzz of unusual activity. Staff members hurried through the hallways, their expressions tense. The news about Lawrence's arrest had clearly spread despite attempts to control the narrative. "There she is," Richard announced, emerging from his office with deliberate showmanship. "Everyone, this is Emma Walker, my new personal assistant who'll be helping me catch up after my unfortunate accident." Emma felt the weight of suspicious stares as Richard led her through the executive suite, introducing her to key personnel. Most offered perfunctory greetings, but Richard's executive secretary, Vanessa, made no attempt to hide her hostility. "I've managed Mr. Harrington's schedule for 8 years," she said icily. "I'm sure you'll find everything overwhelming." "I'm a quick learner," Emma replied with a forced smile. Once inside Richard's private office, he closed the door and lowered his voice. "Vanessa reports directly to Lawrence. Has for years. Assume everything you say or do around her gets reported back." Emma nodded, taking in the spacious office with its wall of windows overlooking the ocean, the same ocean where this had all begun. "Where do we start?" Richard handed her a security card. "This will get you into the restricted archives. Remember, if anyone questions you, you're organizing files for the board meeting." For the next 2 hours, Emma navigated the company's digital archives using Richard's credentials. The sheer volume of information was daunting, but she focused on patient records from the Neurozoloft trials. What she found made her blood run cold. 27 patients had died during the initial trials. All had been classified as unrelated to treatment: heart attacks, strokes, accidents. But the pattern was unmistakable, particularly when she found handwritten notes in the margins minimizing the concerns. Patient JM, liver failure post-dose. Previous alcohol use provides plausible alternative cause. Patient TR, cerebral hemorrhage after 14 days. Subject had undiagnosed hypertension. Classify as pre-existing condition. Emma carefully photographed these records with her phone, her hands trembling slightly. Each notation represented a person, someone who had volunteered for a clinical trial, hoping to help advance medicine, only to have their death disguised as coincidence. Her phone vibrated with a text from Richard. "Board meeting moved up to 2 p.m. They're trying to catch us unprepared." Emma quickly gathered the evidence she'd collected and was about to leave the archive room when her phone rang, the hospital calling about her mother. "Ms. Walker, just updating you that your mother is continuing to improve. Dr. Patel has moved her out of intensive care." Relief washed over Emma. "That's wonderful news. Please tell her I'll visit this evening." As she ended the call, Emma noticed one of the research scientists watching her from across the hallway. Had he overheard her conversation? She smiled professionally and walked past him, fighting the urge to look back. The executive dining room was bustling when Emma arrived for lunch, a strategic move Richard had suggested to establish her presence and observe the key players. She selected a salad and sat alone at a small table, deliberately positioning herself within earshot of several executives. She didn't have to wait long for someone to approach. "Mind if I join you?" Victor Mercer, the CFO Richard had identified as Lawrence's closest ally, set his tray down without waiting for her response. "Of course not, Mr. Mercer." He studied her with calculating eyes. "You've had quite a week, haven't you? Lifeguard to executive assistant in what, 5 days?" Emma maintained her composure. "Life takes unexpected turns." "Indeed it does." Mercer speared a piece of chicken with his fork. Richard has always had an eye for talent, especially in young women who remind him of Melissa. The comment was designed to unsettle her. Emma refused to take the bait. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to assist during his recovery." "Just be careful what you're assisting with," Mercer replied, his tone deceptively casual. "Richard hasn't been himself since his accident. The board is concerned about his judgment." "He seems perfectly lucid to me." Mercer smiled without warmth. "Did he tell you about the others? The young women he took under his wing after Melissa died? They all thought they were special too." Emma set down her fork, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm here to do a job, Mr. Mercer. That's all." "Of course you are." He stood, straightening his immaculate suit. "See you at the board meeting." After lunch, Emma made her way to the research wing, where scientists were working on what appeared to be a modified version of Neurozoloft. She introduced herself as Richard's assistant conducting a routine review, and most researchers were eager to demonstrate their progress. "This reformulation addresses some of the early concerns," explained a young scientist named Dr. Park. "We've modified the molecular structure to reduce liver interactions." "When did this reformulation begin?" Emma asked innocently. "About 3 months ago," Dr. Park replied, "after some unexpected results in the extended trials." "Were those results documented in the FDA submissions?" Dr. Park's expression flickered with uncertainty. "That's really a question for research administration. I just work on the compound itself." Back in Richard's office, Emma relayed what she'd discovered. "They've known about the liver toxicity for months and started reformulating, but they're still pushing forward with FDA approval for the original formula." Richard's jaw tightened. "They're planning to switch formulations after approval, a common tactic to avoid delays. The problem is hundreds of patients are still taking the dangerous version in ongoing trials." As they prepared for the board meeting, Richard formally announced to his staff that a full ethical review would be the central agenda item. The news spread quickly through the building, and Emma noticed increasing scrutiny from security personnel. "They're watching me," she whispered to Richard as they walked toward the boardroom. "Good," he replied. "That means they're nervous." The massive mahogany boardroom doors closed behind them with an ominous click. 12 executives sat around the table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Emma took her position slightly behind Richard's chair, notepad in hand, playing the role of attentive assistant. "Before we begin," Richard announced, "I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Lawrence Vance has been arrested in connection with corporate espionage and other serious charges. This emergency meeting is to ensure transparent oversight of all Neurozoloft development moving forward." Mercer leaned forward. "Richard, while we're all concerned about Lawrence's situation, perhaps this discussion should happen without outside parties." He nodded toward Emma. "Ms. Walker stays," Richard said firmly. "She's assisting me with gathering evidence of potential ethical violations." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "What exactly are you implying, Richard?" James Wilson, the research director, asked sharply. "I'm not implying anything. I'm directly stating that Neurozoloft's clinical data has been falsified and patient deaths have been deliberately misclassified to secure FDA approval. The boardroom erupted in overlapping objections. Emma used the distraction to slip a USB drive into the room's presentation system, ready to display the evidence they'd collected. As the meeting continued, Emma noticed a security guard watching her through the glass wall of the boardroom. When their eyes met, he spoke into his radio. Minutes later, 2 more guards appeared in the hallway. She discreetly texted Richard, "Security building up outside." Richard gave no indication he'd received the message, but smoothly transitioned to their planned reveal. "I've taken the liberty of preparing a complete dossier of the actual Neurozoloft trial results." As Emma moved to activate the presentation, the boardroom door opened. The head of security entered, flanked by 2 guards. "Mr. Harrington, I apologize for the interruption. We have a security concern that requires immediate attention." Emma's heart raced as the security chief turned to her. "Ms. Walker, we need to verify your credentials. There appears to be a discrepancy with your access permissions." "This is ridiculous," Richard interjected. "Ms. Walker is here at my explicit request." "Nevertheless, sir, protocol requires us to investigate unauthorized access to restricted files, which was traced to Ms. Walker's terminal this morning." Emma realized they had been monitoring her all along. They knew exactly what she'd been accessing. "You can verify my authorization after the meeting," she said firmly. "We're in the middle of an important discussion." The security chief stepped closer. "I'm afraid I must insist. Please come with us." As they escorted Emma from the boardroom, she caught one last glimpse of Richard, now standing and protesting her removal. She had no way of knowing if he could salvage their plan without her. In the security office, Emma's badge and phone were confiscated. Through the glass partition, she could see additional guards reviewing security footage of her movements throughout the building. "Ms. Walker," the chief said, returning with a folder, "you accessed highly confidential patient data without proper clearance. That's a serious breach of company policy and potentially federal law." "I had Mr. Harrington's authorization," she insisted. "We have reason to believe Mr. Harrington may not be competent to grant such authorization following his accident." Emma realized the full extent of their strategy. They were positioning Richard as mentally unstable while framing her as an industrial spy. Their move had been calculated and prepared long before the meeting. When her escort briefly stepped away, Emma eyed the ventilation panel above her. Years of maintaining beach facilities had taught her that most commercial buildings used standard duct layouts. That particular model of ceiling vent had a latch that could be released without tools. She also knew that the company's server room had to be nearby. Security offices were typically positioned adjacent to critical infrastructure. Whatever happened next, Emma had to reach those servers and ensure the evidence wasn't destroyed. With Richard potentially neutralized and her academic future already in jeopardy, she had nothing left to lose. In the empty elevator descending to the parking garage, Emma's phone illuminated with a photo. Her sleeping peacefully in her own bed the previous night. Someone had been inside her apartment while she slept. Emma checked her phone anxiously, monitoring the surveillance cameras she'd installed in her mother's hospital room. Despite the chaos unfolding around her, Catherine appeared to be resting peacefully, her vitals stable on the monitors beside her bed. At least something was going right. The boardroom bustled with nervous energy as executives arrived for the meeting. Richard and Emma exchanged a final glance, silently confirming their plan. This was the moment they'd been preparing for, their opportunity to expose the conspiracy and protect countless patients from Neurozoloft's deadly effects. "Everyone take your seats," Richard announced, his authoritative tone silencing the murmured conversations. "We have critical matters to discuss." Emma positioned herself near the presentation system, ready to display their evidence at the crucial moment. She observed the board members settling into their leather chairs, their expressions ranging from curious to overtly hostile. Victor Mercer sat directly across from Richard, his cold eyes occasionally flicking toward Emma with undisguised contempt. "Before we begin," Richard said, straightening his tie, "I want to thank everyone for accommodating this emergency session. In light of recent events, my accident and Lawrence's situation, it's imperative we address some concerning developments regarding Neurozoloft." Diane Harper, the marketing director, leaned forward. "Richard, we're all relieved by your recovery, but perhaps you should take more time before diving back into operations. The stress of your ordeal—" "I assure you my mind is perfectly clear," Richard interrupted. "Which is why I've called this meeting to review our ethical protocols and transparency measures regarding clinical trials." Emma noticed subtle glances exchanged between Mercer, Harper, and James Wilson. They'd anticipated this move. "A noble sentiment," Mercer replied smoothly, "but one we've already addressed extensively. Our compliance department has confirmed all protocols meet or exceed industry standards." Richard nodded toward Emma. "My assistant has prepared a comprehensive presentation that suggests otherwise." As Emma stepped forward to activate the display, the boardroom doors swung open. 2 security officers entered, followed by the company's legal counsel, not Lawrence, but his deputy, Sandra Mills. "Mr. Harrington," Mills announced, her voice carrying an artificial note of regret. "I apologize for this interruption, but I must present some troubling information to the board." Richard stood. "This meeting was called by me as CEO and majority shareholder. Whatever concerns you have can wait." "I'm afraid not." Mills distributed folders to each board member. "These documents demonstrate clear evidence that you have been manipulating company data and making irrational decisions following your traumatic brain injury." Emma watched the blood drain from Richard's face as board members began reviewing the contents of their folders. "This is preposterous," Richard protested. "I haven't—" "Emails from your account," Mills continued, "showing you've been attempting to sabotage Neurozoloft's FDA approval. Psychological evaluations from your hospital stay indicating potential cognitive impairment, and evidence that you've enlisted an unqualified outsider," she gestured toward Emma, "to access confidential patient data." The room erupted in murmurs as board members examined the fabricated evidence. Emma realized with horror that they had been outmaneuvered. Lawrence and his allies had prepared this counterattack meticulously. "These are forgeries," Richard insisted, his voice rising. "Emma and I have uncovered the real fraud: deliberate manipulation of clinical trial results to conceal Neurozoloft's life-threatening side effects." Mercer sighed dramatically. "Richard, this paranoid behavior is precisely what concerns us. You've been fixating on imaginary conspiracies since your accident." "It's all in my presentation," Emma interjected, moving toward the computer. "Let me show you the actual data." The chief of security stepped forward, blocking her path. "Ms. Walker, we've detected unauthorized access to restricted servers using your credentials. I need to escort you from the premises immediately." Emma looked desperately at Richard, whose face had paled further. "This is absurd. I authorized her access personally." "Which is precisely the problem," Mercer said, addressing the board rather than Richard. "Our CEO has given complete access to confidential patient data to an unvetted lifeguard with no qualifications beyond pulling him from the water." Security personnel moved toward Emma as several board members nodded in agreement with Mercer. "I have nursing training and patient care experience," Emma protested, backing away from the approaching guards. "And the evidence is real. Patient deaths covered up, liver toxicity data hidden from the FDA." "Escort Ms. Walker to security for questioning," Mercer ordered, "and call the police. This level of data breach may constitute criminal activity." 2 guards gripped Emma's arms firmly, confiscating her phone and tablet as they led her from the boardroom. The last thing she saw was Richard standing alone at the head of the table, surrounded by executives now viewing him as mentally unstable. In the security office, Emma sat in a small, windowless room while guards reviewed surveillance footage on monitors outside. She could hear them discussing her movements throughout the building that morning, identifying each restricted area she had accessed. "Ms. Walker," the head of security said as he entered the room, "your situation is extremely serious. Industrial espionage carries significant penalties." "This isn't espionage," Emma insisted. "I'm trying to prevent a dangerous drug from killing people." "That's for the authorities to determine." He placed her confiscated badge on the table. "Who else have you shared company data with?" Emma remained silent, her mind racing. She needed to find a way out before the police arrived. Without her phone, she couldn't warn Diane Carter or check on her mother. Worse, she had no idea what was happening to Richard. Through the glass partition, she glimpsed a security monitor showing Richard being escorted from the boardroom, looking disoriented and defeated. Another screen displayed technicians entering the server room, undoubtedly to delete incriminating evidence. When the security chief stepped out to take a call, Emma quickly assessed her options. The room had no windows and only one door, which was now guarded. But above her, a ventilation panel in the ceiling caught her attention. The panel looked loose, one corner slightly ajar, where it had been improperly reinstalled. Years of maintaining beach facilities had taught Emma how to navigate building infrastructure. If the ventilation system was standard, it might connect to other parts of the building, possibly even the server room. Emma waited until her guard became distracted by a commotion elsewhere in the security suite. Using the chair as a boost, she quietly pushed the ventilation panel aside and pulled herself up into the narrow duct. The metal shaft was barely wide enough for her to crawl through. Dust clogged her nose as she inched forward, guided only by the faint sounds of electronic equipment ahead. The server room had to be nearby. Security offices were typically positioned close to critical infrastructure. After several minutes of claustrophobic crawling, Emma reached a junction where cool air flowed strongly, the climate-controlled environment necessary for servers. Following the current, she arrived at another vent opening directly above the company's data center. Through the slats, she could see technicians methodically working through the servers, presumably erasing the evidence she and Richard had discovered. One of them held what looked like a directive on company letterhead: emergency server maintenance protocols. Emma knew she had only one chance to save the data. The fire alarm system would trigger automatic backup procedures to preserve vital records in case of evacuation. It was a desperate move, but her options were dwindling by the second. Stretching through the vent slats, Emma reached the nearest smoke detector and pressed the test button. Instantly, piercing alarms blared throughout the building, and the server room's emergency protocols activated. Sprinklers began spraying water across the space as technicians scrambled to protect equipment. In the chaos, Emma witnessed the automatic backup sequence initiate, all critical data being mirrored to off-site storage, exactly as designed. The evidence would now exist beyond the conspirators' reach. Using the confusion to her advantage, Emma pushed through the vent cover and dropped into the server room. Technicians, focused on saving the equipment, barely noticed her as she slipped through the emergency exit onto a service stairwell. The building evacuation was in full swing, employees streaming toward designated assembly points. Emma blended into the crowd, her soaked clothes drawing curious glances, but no intervention as security personnel focused on managing the evacuation. Once outside, Emma scanned the parking area for any sign of Richard. Instead, she spotted his company car speeding away from the executive garage, with Richard barely visible in the back seat. He wasn't driving, and judging by the car's trajectory, they weren't heading toward the hospital or police station. Emma's blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. This wasn't just about discrediting Richard or stopping their presentation. The conspirators were removing him permanently. With no phone and no transportation, Emma stood in the rain from the sprinklers, watching helplessly as Richard disappeared into the distance. Everything had fallen apart in the span of an hour, their evidence compromised, Richard captured, and Emma herself wanted for corporate espionage. As employees gathered in confused clusters around the building, Emma slipped away from the crowd. She needed to find help, to save Richard, and to protect her mother, who remained vulnerable as long as the people behind Nerozaloft remained in power. While the water from the sprinklers fell on everyone in the evacuating building, Emma escaped in the confusion. But as she reached the parking lot, she saw Richard's car speeding away with him in the back seat, clearly not driving, and definitely not heading toward either the hospital or police station. Emma stood paralyzed in the rain-soaked parking lot, watching Richard's car disappear around the corner. The reality crashed over her like a wave. Richard was being taken somewhere isolated, not to discredit him, but to silence him permanently. She had no phone, no car keys, and security would be looking for her as soon as they realized she'd escaped. Desperation fueled her thoughts as she scanned the parking lot, spotting a familiar face, Jason, her former lifeguard supervisor, dropping off paperwork at an adjacent medical building. "Jason," she called, sprinting across the asphalt. He turned, surprised. "Emma, what are you doing here? You're soaking wet." "I need your help," she interrupted. "I need to borrow your phone and your car. It's an emergency." Jason hesitated, taking in her disheveled appearance and frantic expression. "What kind of trouble are you in?" "The kind where someone will die if I don't act fast," she replied, her voice breaking. "Please, Jason. I've never asked you for anything." Despite his reluctance, Jason handed her his phone. "Make your call, but I'm not giving you my car unless you explain what's happening." Emma dialed Diane Carter first, relieved when the reporter answered immediately. "Richard's been taken," Emma said without preamble. "They caught us trying to expose the Nerozaloft fraud. I think they're going to kill him." "Where did they take him?" Diane asked, instantly alert. "I don't know. Black sedan heading east from Harrington headquarters about 10 minutes ago." "I have contacts who can access traffic cameras," Diane replied. "Text me the license plate if you have it." Emma described the car, ending the call with a desperate plea. "And check on my mother at St. Mary's Hospital. They might target her next." Her next call was to Dr. Patel, who confirmed Catherine was still improving and now had a security guard posted outside her room, Richard's final protective measure before the board meeting. Turning to Jason, Emma provided a condensed version of the past week's events: the rescue, Richard's connection to Nerozaloft, the falsified data, and the attempted exposure. "You sound completely insane," Jason said when she finished. "But I've never known you to lie." He handed her his car keys. "My boat's at Marina Pier 3 if you need it. She's not much, but she's reliable." "Thank you," Emma whispered, fighting tears. "I'll bring it back, I promise." Within 20 minutes, Diane had called back with information from her traffic camera contacts. The car took Highway 1 north, then exited toward the industrial harbor area. Last sighting was near Warehouse Row. Emma knew the area well, a stretch of dilapidated storage facilities and docks where the commercial fishing fleet had once operated before the new port was built. Isolated, rarely patrolled, with deep water access, the perfect place to make someone disappear. Driving Jason's weathered pickup truck, Emma approached the harbor cautiously. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rusting buildings as she parked several blocks away, concealing the vehicle behind an abandoned processing plant. She called Diane once more. "I'm near the harbor. Can you create a diversion? Call in an anonymous tip about suspicious activity on the south side?" "Already done," Diane confirmed. "Police should respond in about 15 minutes, but don't count on much. They don't prioritize calls in that area." Emma knew 15 minutes wasn't enough time. She needed to locate Richard and assess the situation immediately. Reaching into the truck's bed, she found Jason's emergency gear, among it her salvation, a basic diving mask and an old shorty wetsuit that would have to suffice. Changing quickly behind the truck, Emma pulled on the wetsuit. It was too large but would provide some insulation in the cool, harbor waters. She had no fins, no proper equipment, just her training and determination. Scanning the waterfront, Emma spotted what she was looking for: Richard's company car parked behind a gray warehouse with faded lettering. Bay Marine Storage Number 7. Two men stood guard at the main entrance. Rather than approach by land, Emma slipped into the water at an adjacent pier, submerging herself to avoid detection. The harbor water was murky and polluted, stinging her eyes as she propelled herself forward with powerful, silent strokes. Years of ocean rescue training had prepared her for navigating opaque waters. She maintained orientation by feel, following the barnacle-encrusted pilings beneath the docks until she reached the back of warehouse number 7. A small loading platform extended over the water, likely for receiving shipments directly from boats. Emma surfaced cautiously, listening for voices or movement. Hearing nothing, she pulled herself onto the weathered wooden deck, water streaming from her impromptu wetsuit. The warehouse's rear entrance was padlocked, but a ventilation system similar to the one she'd navigated at Harrington Pharmaceuticals provided an alternative. The rusty grate came away easily in her hands, revealing a narrow shaft that might accommodate her slender frame. Squeezing through the opening, Emma crawled through decades of dust and cobwebs. The sound of voices grew louder as she approached another grate overlooking the main floor of the warehouse. Through the slats, she could see Richard tied to a metal chair in the center of the cavernous space. His face was bruised, blood matting his silver hair. 3 men surrounded him: 2 unfamiliar guards and Victor Mercer, who paced impatiently in front of Richard. "The backup files, Richard," Mercer was saying, his voice echoing in the empty warehouse. "Where did Melissa hide them? We know they weren't on the yacht's main drive." Richard's response was too weak for Emma to hear clearly, but Mercer's reaction, a backhanded slap across Richard's face, made his dissatisfaction evident. "We've been patient," Mercer continued, "but with the FDA approval pending next week, we can't afford loose ends. Either you tell us where all the backup data is stored, or we stage your unfortunate suicide, a man overcome with grief, finally reuniting with his beloved daughter." Emma needed a distraction. The warehouse was sparsely furnished, mainly empty except for some abandoned crates and rusty equipment. A stack of old oil drums stood in one corner, potential cover if she could reach them. Deliberately, she shifted her weight, causing the ventilation duct to groan. All 3 men looked up, giving Emma the moment she needed to kick through the grate and drop a heavy metal box she'd found in the duct. The box crashed onto a pile of empty containers, creating a tremendous noise. As the guards rushed to investigate, Emma propelled herself toward the oil drums, concealing herself just as flashlight beams swept the area. "Check it out," Mercer ordered. "Probably rats, but make sure." While the guards searched, Emma crawled behind abandoned machinery, working her way closer to Richard. She needed to create a larger diversion, something that would allow her to free him and escape. Her opportunity came when 1 guard stepped outside to sweep the perimeter. With only Mercer and 1 guard remaining in the main space, Emma spotted a fire alarm on a nearby support column. Timing her move carefully, she sprinted from cover, smashed the glass alarm with her elbow, and dove behind a crate as the warehouse filled with the deafening siren. In the confusion, she reached Richard, using a piece of broken metal to slice through his restraints. "Emma," he rasped, disoriented. "You shouldn't be here." "No time," she replied, helping him to his feet. "Can you walk?" He nodded weakly, leaning heavily against her as they staggered toward the loading dock. Behind them, Mercer shouted orders as the remaining guard discovered Richard's empty chair. "There!" The guard spotted them, just as they reached the rear door. A gunshot cracked through the air, splintering the wood beside Emma's head. With no other option, Emma pulled Richard through the door and onto the loading platform. "We have to swim," she told him, glancing at the dark water below. "It's our only chance." Richard's eyes widened with fear. The water that had nearly claimed his life days before now represented their only escape. Trust me, Emma said, gripping his hand. I won't let you drown. They jumped just as another bullet shattered the railing where they'd stood. The cold water shocked Emma's system, but Richard's panic was the more immediate concern. He thrashed wildly, reopening his shoulder wound, as blood clouded the water around them. Emma wrapped her arm across his chest in a standard rescue hold. Stop fighting, she commanded. Float on your back. I'll do the work. Years of training took over as Emma towed Richard away from the warehouse, using a cargo ship as cover. She swam with one arm, maintaining a steady, silent pace that wouldn't attract attention. By the time they reached the adjacent pier, distant sirens announced the police response to Diane's anonymous tip. Emma helped Richard onto the weathered dock, his sodden clothes heavy with water. My boat? Richard gasped between painful breaths. We need files in the yacht. What are you talking about? Emma asked, checking his bleeding shoulder. The yacht is wrecked. Not completely destroyed, he explained weakly. Cabin intact underwater. Need to show you where. Supporting Richard's weight, Emma helped him toward Jason's truck, constantly scanning for pursuers. They had a small window of opportunity, while police investigated the warehouse, pulling Mercer and his men into explanations and alibis. As they drove away from the harbor, Richard slumped against the passenger door, his face ashen. The combination, he murmured. 7251, Melissa's birthday. Save your strength, Emma replied, accelerating toward the marina where Jason's boat waited. We're not finished yet. At the marina, Emma helped Richard aboard the small fishing boat, settling him on a bench seat. Can you guide me to where the yacht sank? He nodded, pointing weakly toward the horizon. Eastern Point, near the rescue site. Emma started the engine, guiding the boat out of the marina with practiced ease. Her years as a lifeguard had made her comfortable on the water, though usually on rescue craft rather than fishing boats. As they approached the area where she'd pulled Richard from the water days earlier, memories of that rescue flooded back. The storm, the waves, the desperate struggle to keep him alive. Now, once again, she was fighting to save him, but under vastly different circumstances. There, Richard pointed to a barely visible marker buoy bobbing in the darkening water. Directly below. Emma cut the engine, allowing the boat to drift as she prepared for the dive. With only a mask and no proper equipment, this would be challenging, especially with Richard's condition deteriorating. I'll guide you, Richard insisted, struggling to his feet. I need to show you exactly where. You're in no condition to dive, Emma protested. Then I'll direct from here, he countered. But we need those files. They prove everything. Not just about Nero's aloft, but Lawrence's involvement in Melissa's death. The sun was setting as Emma slipped into the water, the orange glow illuminating the surface while darkness claimed the depths below. She took 3 deep breaths, centered herself, and dove. The descent was disorienting without proper equipment. Emma followed the anchor line of the marker buoy, pressure building in her ears as she kicked deeper. Visibility improved slightly as her eyes adjusted to the gloom, revealing the ghostly outline of Richard's yacht lying on its side. The damage was extensive but localized. The hull, breached where it had struck the reef, but the main cabin relatively intact. Emma swam through the broken doorway, fighting against her lungs' demand for air. Inside the cabin, she oriented herself using Richard's instructions, locating the navigation panel now positioned vertically due to the yacht's angle. Her fingers found the hidden keypad, numb with cold as she entered the combination. A small compartment slid open, revealing a waterproof case. Emma grabbed it and kicked for the surface, her lungs burning as she fought the increasing pressure. Breaking through into the twilight air, Emma gasped, filling her lungs with precious oxygen as she swam back to the boat. Richard helped pull her aboard with surprising strength for his condition. You found it, he wheezed, taking the case with trembling hands. The sound of another boat engine approached. Too fast, too purposeful to be a pleasure craft. Emma peered into the gathering darkness, spotting a sleek vessel bearing down on them. Mercer, Richard confirmed, his voice hollow. He must have escaped the police. Emma started Jason's boat engine, pushing it to full throttle as they cut through the waves. But the pursuing craft was faster, gaining steadily as multiple figures became visible on its deck. A gunshot cracked across the water, ricocheting off their hull. Emma zigzagged, using her knowledge of the coastline to navigate toward the shallower waters where the larger boat couldn't follow. In the distance, blue and red lights pulsed. A police boat responding to emergency calls about gunfire on the water. Emma steered directly toward it, hoping the presence of law enforcement would deter their pursuers. Her gamble paid off. Mercer's boat veered away sharply, unwilling to risk confrontation with authorities. As their pursuers disappeared into the darkness, Emma allowed herself a moment of relief. Diane Carter was waiting at the dock with police officers when they arrived. Anonymous tip about armed suspects on the water, she explained with a wink as paramedics rushed to attend to Richard. Emma watched as they loaded Richard into an ambulance, the waterproof case containing their evidence securely in her possession. His eyes met hers briefly before the doors closed, a look of trust and gratitude that transcended words. With Richard bleeding in her arms as they floated in the dark waters of the harbor, Emma realized the terrible irony. Once again, she was saving his life in dangerous waters, but this time, she was the one who didn't know if they would survive. The frigid harbor water sapped Emma's strength as she struggled to keep Richard's head above the surface. His blood left a faint trail in the dark water. His breathing increasingly labored against her shoulder. "Hold on," she urged, kicking toward Jason's boat, which drifted 20 yards away. "Just a little further." Richard mumbled something unintelligible, his body growing heavier in her grip. The rescue hold she'd employed thousands of times in training felt impossibly difficult now, her own exhaustion threatening to pull them both under. A beam of light cut across the water. "There!" Jason's voice carried over the gentle waves, his silhouette visible at the helm of his boat as he maneuvered closer. With one final surge of determination, Emma swam toward the light. Jason reached over the side, helping her hoist Richard's limp form onto the deck before extending a hand to pull her aboard. "Jesus, Emma," Jason muttered, taking in Richard's blood-soaked shirt and Emma's exhausted state. "What the hell happened?" "Gunshot wound," Emma gasped, immediately applying pressure to Richard's shoulder. "We need to get him to the paramedics now." Jason didn't waste time with questions, throttling the engine to full speed as they cut through the harbor toward the main dock, where flashing lights indicated emergency services had arrived. "Hang in there," Emma whispered to Richard, whose face had taken on an alarming pallor. His eyelids fluttered, blue eyes briefly focusing on her face. "The drive," he managed weakly. "Keep it safe." "I will," she promised, feeling the waterproof case secured at her waist. "Stay with me." The boat bumped against the dock, where paramedics were already waiting with a stretcher. Emma reluctantly stepped back as they took over, attaching monitors and starting an IV while moving Richard to the ambulance. Diane Carter approached, notebook conspicuously absent, her expression unusually somber. "I called in every favor I had with the local PD," she explained. "Anonymous tips about armed suspects on the water tend to get attention." "Thank you," Emma said, suddenly aware of how cold she was, her wetsuit providing minimal protection after extended immersion. "Federal agents are on their way," Diane continued, handing Emma a towel. "The evidence you collected triggered multiple jurisdictions. This goes beyond corporate fraud now. Attempted murder, conspiracy, falsifying medical research." Emma watched as the ambulance doors closed, Richard disappearing inside. "How did you know to send help?" "I've been monitoring police bands since you called." Diane's voice softened. "I know what it's like to go up against people like this alone. No one did that for me when I was investigating them 3 years ago." A detective approached, his badge identifying him as Morales from Major Crimes. "Ms. Walker, I need to ask you some questions about tonight's events." Emma nodded, clutching the waterproof case. "This contains evidence of everything I'm about to tell you. But first, I need to know my mother is safe." 30 minutes later, after confirming Catherine was secure and providing an initial statement, Emma rode in a police cruiser to the hospital. The detective had been surprisingly understanding, allowing her to shower and change into scrubs borrowed from the ER before continuing their interview. "The federal prosecutor will want to speak with you tomorrow," Morales explained as they walked toward the intensive care unit. "The evidence you recovered appears quite compelling." "Will it be enough?" Emma asked. "Combined with the testimony you and Mr. Harrington can provide?" "Absolutely." He gestured toward the ICU doors. "He's asking for you." Richard looked fragile beneath the hospital lights, monitors beeping steadily around him. The bullet had been removed, the surgeon reporting that it had missed major arteries by millimeters. "Emma," he whispered as she approached, his voice hoarse but clear, "you saved my life. Again." She managed a tired smile. "Let's stop making it a habit." His hand reached for hers, surprisingly strong despite his condition. "The drive?" "Safe with the FBI cybercrime unit," she assured him. "Diane says they've already found enough evidence to shut down Neurozoloft production and issue a recall for all trial medications." Relief washed over Richard's features. "And your mother?" "Improving. The antidote is working." Emma sat in the chair beside his bed. "The doctors say she might be able to go home in a week." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the extraordinary events that had brought them together. "I've been thinking," Richard finally said, "about Melissa, about what she would have wanted." Emma waited, sensing the importance of his words. "She became a whistleblower because she believed in doing the right thing, regardless of personal cost." His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I failed her then by not listening sooner. I won't fail her memory now." "What will you do?" "Rebuild Harrington Pharmaceuticals from the ground up. Ethical research, transparent testing, accessible pricing." He squeezed her hand. "And I'd like your help." Emma raised an eyebrow. "I'm still a nursing student, remember? Precisely why I need you. Someone who sees medicine from the patient perspective, not the profit margin." He shifted slightly, wincing at the pain. "The Melissa Harrington Foundation for Medical Ethics needs a student representative on its board." Before Emma could respond, Detective Morales returned with news. The FBI had arrested Victor Mercer attempting to flee the country, and 2 other Harrington executives had turned themselves in, offering testimony in exchange for leniency. "They're singing like canaries," Morales reported. "Apparently Lawrence wasn't the mastermind after all. Mercer was pulling the strings from the beginning, including—" He glanced at Richard apologetically, "arranging the circumstances around your daughter's accident." Richard closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this final confirmation of what they had suspected. When he opened them again, determination had replaced grief. "I want to make a full statement," he told the detective. "Everything I know about the company's practices, Lawrence's involvement, all of it." As Morales took notes, Emma slipped out to check on her mother. Catherine was awake, her complexion noticeably improved, watching news coverage of the unfolding scandal. "There you are," Catherine smiled weakly. "My hero daughter, all over the news." Emma glanced at the television, surprised to see footage of the harbor and headlines about a major pharmaceutical fraud exposed. Thus far, her name had been kept out of the reports, identified only as a whistleblower working with Richard Harrington. "How are you feeling?" Emma asked, taking her mother's hand. "Better than I have in months." Catherine studied her daughter's face. "Though I think I'm doing better than you are. You look exhausted, sweetheart." Emma couldn't argue with that assessment. The past week had pushed her to physical and emotional limits she hadn't known existed. "It's almost over now," she assured her mother. "The bad guys are in custody, Richard is recovering, and most importantly, you're getting better." Catherine squeezed her hand. "And your studies? After all this excitement, can you go back to being a regular nursing student?" Emma laughed, softly. "I'm not sure regular is in my future anymore." 6 months later, Emma adjusted her sunglasses as she scanned the shoreline from her elevated position in the Lifeguard tower. The red flag fluttered at half-staff, a warning for moderate surf conditions rather than the dangerous storm that had set everything in motion half a year earlier. Her promotion to Lifeguard supervisor had come with increased responsibility, but also flexible hours that allowed her to continue her nursing studies. The scholarship from the newly established Melissa Harrington Foundation covered all her educational expenses, no strings attached. Movement on the water caught her attention, a modest but elegant yacht approaching the shore at a respectful distance from the swimming area. Emma smiled, recognizing the vessel immediately. She climbed down from the tower, signaling to her teammate that she was taking a break. By the time she reached the shoreline, the yacht had anchored, and a small tender was making its way to the beach. Richard stood at the bow, looking remarkably healthy in casual linen clothing, his silver hair tousled by the ocean breeze. Beside him sat Catherine, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, her complexion no longer ghostly but glowing with recovered health. "Permission to come ashore, Supervisor Walker?" Richard called, his voice carrying across the water. Emma laughed, wading into the shallows to help secure the tender. "Permission granted, but only if you brought lunch." Catherine embraced her daughter as she stepped onto the sand. He insisted on packing a proper picnic. "I think he's trying to fatten me up after all that hospital food." The three of them settled on a blanket above the tide line, unpacking an elaborate lunch while catching up on recent developments. The trial of Lawrence, Mercer, and the other executives was progressing, with sentencing expected within months. Harrington Pharmaceuticals had undergone a complete restructuring, with a new board focused on ethical research and development. "The FDA just approved our revised MS treatment," Richard announced, passing Emma a sandwich. "Properly tested, fully transparent data, and at half the planned cost of Neurozoloft." "That's wonderful," Emma replied. "Will it help Mom?" "I'm already on the new protocol," Catherine confirmed. "Dr. Patel says my latest scans show significant improvement." As they ate, Emma watched families enjoying the beach, children splashing in the shallows, couples walking along the shore. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware how close they'd come to having a deadly medication released into the market. "You know what's ironic?" Richard said, following her gaze. "I spent decades building a pharmaceutical empire, believing I was helping people. It took nearly dying, and being saved by you, to realize I'd lost sight of what really matters." When lunch was finished, Catherine announced she wanted to walk along the shoreline, leaving Emma and Richard alone on the blanket. "I have something for you," Richard said, retrieving an envelope from his pocket. "The final paperwork for your scholarship foundation. No restrictions, no obligations, just as promised." Emma accepted the envelope, knowing it represented her future secured, the ability to complete her education without financial stress and to provide for her mother's ongoing care. "You had me investigated that first day after the rescue," she said, not a question, but a statement of fact. "You were looking for someone to replace Melissa." Richard nodded, not denying it. "You were right about me," he admitted quietly. "I was searching for substitutes for Melissa, but when you saved me, I realized nothing would fill that void. I needed to do the right thing for her instead." "And the scholarship?" "Still valid, but not to buy your silence. To honor two extraordinary women, Melissa and you." Emma smiled, watching the waves that had brought them together. The same ocean that had nearly claimed Richard's life had also given her purpose beyond anything she could have imagined. You know what's ironic? She said, echoing his earlier comment. In the end, the one who really needed saving wasn't you on that yacht. It was me.